I'd just like to welcome Lorna Ferguson, who has been participating in the Intermediate Expert Witness Training course, and she's been a very lively and intellectually curious participant, and I really enjoy that energy, and we want to honor that energy, and I'm very interested in having this interview with Lorna. We'll find out a bit about her practice and her professional experience, and then we'll also find out a little bit about her experience and what she's learned from the course itself. So Lorna, with that introduction, welcome. Lovely to meet you, even if only virtually. And welcome to your interview.
Thank you. Shall I call you counselor or shall I call you Ian?
You please call me Ian.
I'm going to do that.
Yes.
And yeah, okay, good. All right. Now, I've been thinking about this because I find this the most innovative approach, actually, to your candidates, to your pupils. And although I think I haven't found it daunting, I found the idea of it daunting. What a wonderful idea. So if I'm going to introduce myself, I need to tell you that I became an attorney in my early 50s.
Right.
Before that, I was an art museum director.
Okay.
And I wrote, because I'm a twin, and my twin was in foreign affairs, I wrote up a project that reintroduced South Africa into the international cultural arena because we'd been in boycott. And that was an extraordinary experience. But I decided to do law. My brother did law. And I decided to do law in my late 40s. And I was trained as I'm a Witsie, and I was trained in the Wits Law Clinic, mainly because,
do you know that I actually worked very closely with the Wits Law Clinic in
well, I know you were at
mid-1990s. I was at Kells, indeed. Yes. And I worked quite a bit with the attorney at the Wits Law Clinic, Peter Geordie. I don't know if you ever knew Peter Geordie.
Of course I knew. Everybody knows Peter Geordie.
I know. What a wonderful character. What an amazing attorney. Yes.
And I know they did. I had an unfortunate experience when I was an articled clerk because my husband was murdered. And the person and the person who rushed to my assistance was Peter Geordie, telling me what to do and et cetera, et cetera. But the law clinic made sure that we were very, very widely separated because I think we both A-type personalities, and they didn't want any clash between us. Anyway, so yes, Peter Geordie, and I was in the refugee clinic, which was all very well and good. But they moved me to Philippa Kruger, who is an older attorney and who could deal with, I think, me when I was in a high state of mourning and that sort of thing. So, but she went off to sit on the bench. And so my introduction to and training in family law, which I'm a family lawyer, came because I was running a pile of 140 active files.
Yeah.
Anyway, so I'm going to approach this as my career leading through the kind of training programs I've either voluntarily put myself through or have fallen into. And family law was
Lorna, just before, if I can interrupt there, just give us a year. When approximately were you with the Wits Law Clinic?
In 2002 and 3.
Okay. Yeah. So I was there, I'm trying to think now, was it 96 and 97? That's right, because I came to the bar in 1997. So I think I was there from 95 to 97. Yeah, so a little bit before you, but yeah, so roughly the same time. All right.
Well, first of all, I started off at UNISA, but it wasn't what suited me. And so I went to Wits and I worked night shift as an editor. A sub-editor on Sowetan and thing. And I've got an English honors degree, so I was very well qualified to do that. And, in your course, I'm jumping around a bit, I know that. But in your course, yes, last night, you were speaking about how the expert witness report needs to be well formatted and
Mm,
etc. And I think because I've got an English honors degree and because I worked as a sub editor for 6 years actually, I
mm,
think I'm really well suited to
mm,
edit and put the expert witness report into a
mm.
really slap up condition, you know?
Mm. Yeah, and you know those points about style.
Yeah,
You see, they hopefully will really resonate with you because those style points and the one point that I made in particular is those small blemishes. It's like
yeah.
a ripple in a still pond. It's just so noticeable when you've got a slight typo or there's some stylistic problem with your report, and that detracts from the substance, doesn't it? So it's actually quite a problem.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it does. It would be like reading a newspaper full of errors, you know?
It's a very good analogy. How reliable would that source of information be? It's a very apt analogy because you're actually reading the expert report for information. Now, if they can't get their grammar and their text right and the presentation and all those stylistic aspects, how can you possibly rely on the content?
Yeah, yeah,
Mm.
yeah. And
All right.
the next sort of area of expertise that I have is as a labor lawyer. And
All right.
I trained as a commissioner when I think the CCMA was at its zenith under Nareen Khan.
Mm.
And I love labor law, absolutely love it,
Mm.
because the judicial standard is fairness. And of
Mm.
course, as a twin, I understand that very, very well. You know what my brother got, I needed to get.
Yeah.
But also,
Don't worry, I have twin boys, so I perfectly we
understand.
learned when they were 2 years old, you didn't dare buy a red toy car and a blue toy car because they would both fight over the red toy car. You bought two red toy cars or two blue toy cars, and there is definitely it's a very interesting concept that I do think that twins they're very aware of fairness and being treated fairly. I would agree with that. Yeah.
Well, you know,
Mm.
the interesting thing is as well is that you can explain it. You know, if you're sitting
Mm.
in a commission, and you're doing conciliation, um, you need both parties to understand that
Mm.
the judicial standard is fairness and that you're going to
Mm.
be reaching out to them very fairly, you know,
Mm. Mm.
and that even toddlers understand
That's right. It's just
what
ingrained in
fairness
human
is.
nature. Yeah, that's right.
Absolutely. So
Yeah,
so
it is.
I really love labor law. And
Mm.
then I'm a mediator,
Oh,
um, and I
wonderful. Mm.
and I trained as a mediator through mediation and motion, which
Oh,
means I've
yeah.
got not only through the CCMA but also a diploma through UCT.
Yeah,
You know,
that
and
commercial mediation course with Alan
yeah, and
Nelson. Yeah, I qualified as well. Yeah.
yeah.
Mm.
So it'd be very interesting to speak to you a little later in this interview how
Mm.
I moved from the litigation approach in my case, because I think I told
Mm.
you that I was involved in a case, and I was really rather thrilled when you complimented me and you said, you know, why are you doing this course? And I said, because I've got a client. I've got a client who is actually an
Mm.
incomplete quadriplegic.
Mm.
And you said, well done for signing up. And
Yeah, very
um,
much so.
I must say, as I said, I was going to jump around a bit. I mean, this course is the most amazing. Uh, it, it equips us not only by spoon feeding us, but it's so superbly welded to case law.
Mm.
And I mean, as an attorney and not as a prospective witness, expert witness, I find that very thrilling. I mean, I love having a steep learning curve, and this course has been completely wonderful from that point of view. You know, I mean,
Well,
I
thank you
really
very much for that. Yeah.
no,
Mm.
it's wonderful because just to repeat myself, it's both spoon feeding us and challenging us. You know,
Mm.
so
I just on that, tying it very closely to principle, it's very important. And I learned when I was at CALS, I worked with some real legal luminaries, and probably the one that I worked most closely to and was my real sort of almost my idol when I was at that formative stage was Edwin Cameron. And you read Edwin's judgments, and they are just so meticulously presented, so beautifully put together, and so unerringly correct,
Yeah,
and in both principle and in fairness, what you talk about. And the standard at CALS was very high. We had all sorts of those that know CALS will know the types of people that were at that center, and at a very
sure.
formative age. I was in my early 20s, and I was surrounded by, you talk about I was there while they were drafting the Labor Relations Act, and Helton Cheadle and
Oh,
who the
wow.
couple of the others were there forming the act. Actually,
Yeah,
I watched it being formed. I mean, and this is now what, 20, 30 years later, and we
yeah,
have this rich body of jurisprudence and a whole approach to labor law, which was literally forged. I could see it happening, and there were the meetings. I wasn't very closely involved, but I did help out on occasion, and it was just very exciting to see that. And I learned so much from those really top quality lawyers,
yeah.
about taking principle and applying it in practice. Because if you think of CALS, the Center for Applied Legal Studies, that's exactly what we were taught to do, is to take principle and apply it in practice. So it was a wonderful foundation. And you're making me wonder now the extent to which that formative stage where I spent those 2 years has impacted my entire career, and certainly has left its imprint on this training. There's no doubt.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me.
Mm,
But you're bringing up Edwin Cameron. When I was in fourth year at Wits, I decided that I wanted to go to the bar.
mm.
And so I thought about it a lot, actually. And, I scrabbled around doing some research and thought, I can't do this on my own. So I used to bunk lectures and go off to the Constitutional Court to sort of,
Yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah, yeah,
those
yeah.
are the early
Oh, yeah,
days of
yeah, yeah.
Constitutional Court, and it was
When the
wonderful.
original Concord, and who was on the bench? Was that was
Chaskelson,
Chaskelson? Yeah, that's right.
yeah,
Yeah, no, I was
yeah,
involved with quite a few of those matters, and they had a formidable bench. Um,
yes.
Didcot was on that bench. LB
And
Sachs was on
Kriegler,
that bench. Kriegler was on the bench. No, it was a formidable Mohammed.
that's right.
Yeah, no, some wonderful, wonderful characters. He's quite, yeah,
So, I mean, one of the highlights was, going and listening to those cases that have really become the sort of
yeah,
basis of Chapter 2,
yeah, that's
of the
right. Yeah,
Constitution.
yeah.
It was wonderful. But I decided I wanted to go and I wanted to be an advocate. And so I
Mm.
chose the biggest teddy bear I could think up, and that was
I know who it was.
who?
Uh,
Budlinder. Yes.
Either him or Gilbert, not Marcus. Who was I thinking of now? Jeff Bezos, George Bezos. Yeah,
No. So, no,
George, George. I almost did a matter with George. We ended up doing it with Wim Trengove, but we went to consult with Wim and at the Legal Resources Center, and Bezos was sort of off in one corner. So that was I had that sort of interaction with Bezos, but yeah, I mean it was an incredible experience with Trengove, and but Budlinder is another now has leading, and now of course his son is doing very well. But anyway, so you want to do pupillage with Budlinder?
well, I wasn't. Let's just wait for the aeroplane to go over. I
I
wasn't
can't
quite
hear it.
that, oh, I wasn't quite that forward, actually. I didn't say to him, I want to do pupillage with you. I said to
Yeah.
him, I want to be an advocate.
Uh,
And so he entertained me most beautifully. He sat me
mm,
down in a boardroom
good.
and he said to me,
Mm.
Lorna, do you know how much it costs me to have you sitting here? So I said, no,
Oh.
I have really no idea at all. So he
Mm,
said, well, let me spell it out. And he
mm,
went through what it costs and how
mm,
important it is for somebody to brief you, And he said,
mm,
how are you going to be briefed? And I said, well,
mm.
I don't know how I'm going to be briefed. It's just going to rain down from heaven on my
Yeah, no,
head,
no, no.
Anyway, he
If
was
only,
wonderful.
yeah.
Anyway,
Mm,
so he was the one who said to me, Lorna, why don't you? He said, no, nobody should go straight from an LLB into being a
yeah.
counsel. He said, nobody except Edwin Cameron, which is how I got to this point in
Yeah,
in the
yeah. And the
conversation.
other one from my neck of the woods that succeeded fantastically well, having gone that path, was Malcolm Wallace.
Oh, really?
So he
Okay.
also, yeah, he didn't do articles. He went straight to the bar.
Well, anyway, so
And
Jeff,
is one of the most powerful jurists that my division has ever produced. So yeah.
really, hey. Anyway,
Mm,
so that was Budlander SC's advice to me, become an attorney
mm,
first.
mm.
So
Good
I, I
advice.
did I
Mm,
did quite a lot of interviews. I mean, I got 5 law school prizes,
mm.
as always happens when you're an older student. You work like crazy and you get these honors.
Yeah, I don't
And
think it always happens. I think that's a tremendous achievement.
well, it's certainly something. I mean, I haven't been able to ride on the coattails of that because off I went to interviews and nobody wanted to employ an older woman. I would be interviewed by 3 young men, mostly, who would say to me, now, why should we give you this position as a candidate attorney when, there are women who have their whole lives ahead of them? And initially, I started trying to answer that question and say, well, I'm not going to want to have children, and I'm not going to want to sort of be
Mm,
posted to your London office, and I'm not going to want to do
mm,
this, that, and the other. And then I thought, what an incredible cheek.
mm.
So, in one of my sort of really quite big interviews, I pushed my chair back and said, well, if those are the questions you're going to address to me, I don't think this is the place for me. So I was actually very sort of, what was it?
Forthright.
Yeah, anyway, so the law clinic took pity on me and off I went there. And
Mm,
from there, I told you that my husband was murdered, so I didn't really have the opportunity of pupillage. I needed to
mm,
launch into my attorney's career immediately. And of course, I
mm,
was obviously a family lawyer, as I told you. And
mm,
then I went off to the CCMA and was trained as a as a commissioner. And then uh, a couple of things in between. But anyway, mediation has been the next big thing. And
mm,
now this.
mm,
And I just love the idea of being involved in medico-legal matters.
mm.
And I think your course is going to be, I mean, I'm going to whack this case if I can do it. I really am. And it's going to be because I think you might see what damage I've done to your publication.
That's the way
if
it should
you
be. That's a
yeah, no,
that's a compliment. That's what it's designed for. No,
yeah,
very
yeah.
much so. Yeah.
So and I mean, I was thinking last night about how I would brief.
Mm,
I've got to brief somebody who's very big,
mm,
uh, who's a neurosurgeon,
mm,
and I shouldn't mention his name or identify him too clearly, but
mm,
he heads up a university department, and
mm,
he's a fabulous man. He's a giant of a
mm,
man, and I have to
mm.
brief him properly. And I was thinking last night when you were going through how to, you know, how to brief.
Instructing. Mm,
Absolutely, I thought, I
mm.
really need a soft copy. I need a digital copy of this so that I can brief him directly from your instructions. So that's what I've got up my sleeve to ask you next.
Okay.
And but but the big problem for me is something that I wrote on our group last night, which is that the attorney of record has to provide the funds for all of
Mm,
these,
yeah.
um, and I don't have those funds. I
Mm,
don't have the
mm,
I don't have the wherewithal to pay what I think
mm,
something as complex as
mm,
uh, the expert report that you
mm,
outlined last night. I don't have
mm.
the fees to do that.
Yeah.
And I mean, is
Mm.
this going to knock me off my case? I
Mm,
don't
it
know
could
how to
well.
proceed.
To be
Yeah.
brutally honest, it could. It is probably the most challenging practical problem. So we've gone through all the technical requirements, but the practice and the business management, and how to get fees, and how to get revenue. That's the actual challenge from a so that's the business side, and the business side is tremendously challenging, particularly when you're dealing with expert witnesses, because the litigation is extraordinarily expensive, and how you fund it depends in part on the arrangements that you have in place with your if you're the attorney with the experts, and then of course counsel. But there's a way that you've got to build relationships and build a practice and start. winning cases and build up a kitty, and it takes time. Um, and unfortunately, that's the reality of it. And lack of funds is a very real challenge, a very real challenge. So yeah, that is an issue.
Well,
Um,
I'm quite distraught about that actually, because
mm,
it's only really dawned on me this past week, when my client said to me, you know, the case is old, to tell you the truth. I've taken it over
mm,
from another attorney, and his
mm,
company was actually funding the witness reports, etc. But the way
mm,
they were going about it, I know for sure they'd have lost. And
mm,
so it seems to me that it's really problematic if I can't
mm.
access funds to,
No, very much so.
I mean,
Mm,
is this really where I'm going with this? I mean, I must say I've been crushingly disappointed by this possibility. And I think, on Saturday there was a SAMLR meeting, and I think I think they got a bit annoyed with me because one of the participants, who was a wonderful man, Professor, I think his name was Jan Eckers or something, who I looked up because I missed his CV. Um, and he said, "Why should I throw my colleagues under the bus?" And I thought, that's exactly what we all talk about, the
mm,
medical profession sort of closing ranks
mm,
and that sort of thing. Anyway, he was very contentious and
mm.
he said, and he made it very clear that he was not going to put up with attorneys and advocates who called him as and when they thought it was appropriate for litigation. He said, "I want to be there all the time."
Yeah.
So, as you know, I'm capable of interrupting. So I said to him, "And who's going to pay for that?" I said, "Do you want us
Not the
to
way.
pay for all the time that you're not in the theater," because he's a surgeon, and all
Yeah.
the time that you're not in the theater while you're sitting in court? And he said, "Yes, absolutely."
Okay.
So but then I asked the thing. I said, "How can you train 81 people to be expert witnesses with them having the expectation that they're going to be paid up front for their reports, and in fact giving the impression that they can withhold their reports if they're not paid?"
Mm.
With all of this, it seems to me that this new avenue of law, which I'm finding so exciting and so challenging, and that I'm feeling so enthusiastic about, is going to sort of melt away because I don't have,
Yeah. You
you
have
know,
to, yeah, it might be an idea to speak to one or two seasoned attorneys, but that commercial aspect is, well, as I say, that's the business side, that's the hard-nosed pragmatism of it, and then the expert side of it, or the technical side, which is what we've been dealing with, is very enriching, very rewarding, very challenging, but it is very expensive, and so that is a puzzle that you'll unfortunately have to solve. And I can put you in touch with one or two senior attorneys as to how they do it, but it takes time and it is not easy.
well, I'd just like to say thank you for offering such a wonderful course, actually, and answering my question. You answered the question that I said, put on the group the other day, which said, "Why should we buy your general damages book when there are these other
A good
ones?"
question, a very good question, fair question.
Well, you answered
Very,
it
very
so,
happy to. Well, I mean, there's an answer.
yeah,
There's a very clear answer, and in fact, there's a very real need for these quantum guidelines from a number of perspectives. We will start rolling out the marketing material now, hopefully during the course of this week, or early next week. But there are a number of areas that dealt with in that textbook that are not dealt with anywhere else.
yeah,
Certainly not fully. And for instance, the narrative test, personal injury trusts, and then what we do with our with our comparative table of cases, which none of those other works does, is we divide them into injury diagnosis and outcome diagnosis, which is very,
oh,
very important from
yes,
both a narrative test perspective, but also from a causation perspective, because there's, of course, you have to show a link between the injury, between the negligence, the fault or the intent, but usually in this field of work, negligence, culpa,
yeah,
and then the injury, so the injury diagnosis, but you also have to show a link between the injury diagnosis and the outcome diagnosis. So in other words, that injury caused the sequelae which allow for compensation. So you get cases, for instance, where there could be a negligent act, such as a motor vehicle accident or medical malpractice, which leads to an injury, but doesn't lead to the sequelae which the plaintiff is claiming. It could, for instance, have been a previous motor vehicle accident, or the person could have been injured in an assault. So there are
Yeah.
two legs to the causal inquiry. And then what's very important, one of the very important practical consequences is when you separate merits and quantum, which happens every single day in thousands of cases around the country. The SCA has said you must identify exactly what you're asking the court to find. And I have not seen anybody correctly identify that causal distinction. There's a very important causal distinction in personal injury cases that is not properly identified, and the book addresses that amongst there are many other topics, but for instance that. And so our table of cases is set out on those grounds to demonstrate the difference between injury diagnosis and outcome diagnosis. And so yeah, there are a couple of really interesting groundbreaking concepts, but at the end of that will be a very good handbook with clear, crisp legal principles, not overly verbose, designed for the busy practitioner, but to give them proper information as to how to deal with the quantification of damages. And I think it's going to be a very interesting textbook to release. There's been a lot of interest in it, individually and also of institutional interest. So yeah, we're looking forward to that release. I'm trying to wrap it up, working quite hard to get it wrapped up. It's difficult to wrap up a textbook because of the stylistic points. You have to have your footnotes correct. You have to have your grammar correct. All of that takes a lot of editing and a lot of very painstaking work. So anyway,
Well, you
I
can always
welcome that
lean on me
question.
for that.
Oh,
But
well,
just
no. Well, there may well be a niche for you there. It's possible that you could have experts sending reports to you for you to check the stylistic aspect of it. These things are possible.
yeah, yeah, good. Well, it would be wonderful. Just want
No,
to say
that's
thank you to you've got two wonderful assistants. One of them is Che Sinclair, and the other
yeah.
is Zita Muller. And I mean,
Mm.
I must tell you that they're totally spot on the ball, So
I'm
thank you
wonderful
to
to hear
them.
that. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm very pleased to hear that. Lorna's genuinely been a real pleasure. I've actually enjoyed our chat, and you're our first interview from this course, and it's been a fantastic interview. And what I really like about it is, we get to know you as a person, and I understand you and your background. We've got many points in common. And I look forward to the rest of the course and interacting with you and giving you value for your time and your money.
Okay, well, I've got my eye on the next course, the advanced course, don't you? I told
Yeah.
you that. Yeah.
Yeah, we are actually at the moment discussing possibly the next thing we will do is a series of workshopping the content which we've done in this course, so to
Yeah.
really allow people to internalize and understand that what we've taken them through in this course. And we would welcome you on that, and I look forward to further interactions with you, Lorna.
Okay, please put me in touch with those heavyweight attorneys who are going
Yeah.
to help me through the business part of this.
I'm going to put you in touch, in particular, with one individual who's a close friend of mine, who's given me a lot of work over the years, but is a very savvy lady, and you can have a chat to her, and she'll certainly give you some pointers.
Okay, super.
All right.
Thank you so much for
Okay,
this.
Lorna, thank you so much. Fantastic. Cheers. Lovely
Bye-bye.
meeting you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Bye.